run logo circles as a way of responding to this by giving people a tangible alternative, right? So instead of being kind of despondent and instead of feeling like there's no hope and there's nothing we can do and feeling nihilistic, we can start organizing, solving real issues ourselves. And by doing that, we take back this agency over not just our own lives, but also agency of change that we can bring positive change to our communities. The second key pillar of circles is responding to this rise of authoritarianism around the world and the network suppression that follows that. So, kind of as we see this decline in democracy around the world, we see a rise of authoritarianism. So, over 70% of people around the world are living under authoritarian regimes or eroding democratic regimes. That's from Democracy Index last year. And what we see in authoritarian regimes is free expression being criminalized, right? So we see centralized digital platforms being weaponized by governments and also by corporations alike. And this is where we believe that through circles, we can start building censorship resistant, privacy first applications that are kind of creating this decentralized, shared civic space. And then the third kind of key pillar of circles is responding to the meaning crisis. And shout out to Sterling. I think every time I'm talking to new circle stewards that are kind of coming on and taking this training and learning more about circles, I always shout out to you for kind of bringing the meaning crisis, particularly the series of lectures by Jean Vervaeke, where he kind of discusses this fall in people's connections with their local communities. It's kind of a run on from Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone and kind of this crisis of individualism. And so circles are responding to that by creating spaces where we can build relationships rooted in these shared values, creating these rituals of mutual care with one another. And we do that through acting on winnable issues. So that's what we come up and talk about every week with our updates about what's happening in circles. It's this idea of rediscovering what civic life can look like from the ground up by contributing to local society and solving local issues in a way that, yeah, can bring meaning to yourself, bring meaning to your group. You know, I think everyone's making real friendships, real relationships with the people they meet in circles. And yeah, it's what we want to do is reviving the social fabric, right? So by creating this purpose-driven collective action around these issues, we really think that we can start growing a global movement of people who are giving back to their community and having fun while doing it and making real friendships and starting to find real use cases for this technology that we're building, real defensible use cases that are actually solving problems and being used instead of just amazing technology sitting in GitHub repos. Yeah, so I have some shout outs to give some circle stewards, but if anyone wants to jump in and kind of add their thoughts about circles, feel free. So I'm not TED talking up here.
I liked your TED talk. That was. We'll talk about the Toastmasters ribbon. You're definitely in the running for winning said ribbon at the end. So we're gonna make sure. Well, we're gonna see if there's any challengers today.
Oh, wow, I do not deserve the ribbon.
Nice. No, seriously, well said. I'm glad that you reiterated the pillars too, because I think that's important that we do talk about those often, especially for anybody who comes into the space and they're new. Maybe they're just starting to hear about logos. Maybe they're just starting to hear about logo circles as well. So understanding the values that drive and that energize the movement are critical for a person to feel like they or to at least understand that they might want to get involved, right? Or if they want to get involved now, they have an understanding of the ideas. And yeah, I'm glad that you also, of course, Amelia mentioned all the pillars. You bring back the meaning crisis, which is, of course, one of my favorite things to talk about, because it's also the just for me personally, just being part of logos, even before, right? When I first, just a little bit of an anecdote, before I even started or before we started the Circles initiative, I was already at Logos with you guys, and I already felt like I was in a community that shared my values, right? And this has just been typically true of some parts of the blockchain industry, right? Or blockchain adjacent industries where it's there, there's more of a rough and tumble attitude. There's more of sort of a cypherpunk, or at very least a rebellious streak in the people working in this industry. And for me personally, that was a massive transition from just working in the traditional corporate world, which is basically where I worked previously. And you'll have to excuse me if I refer to working at Walmart as the corporate world, because I did work in management. But the whole vibe in that environment is completely different from just being in these communities where there's more of a mutual understanding, and there's more of an understanding of that you can be yourself, and that you can make connections with people and come together and work toward creating what you want to create to make the world a better place. It doesn't just feel like a 9 to 5. And now we're taking that to the next level with Logo Circles, where we can actually solve problems, bring back the agency that was Amelia was speaking to, and reestablish what I refer to as the middleware of society, those organizations, those social structures, those civic entities that allow us to repair certain aspects of our society that has been in disrepair for such a long period of time as a direct result of institutional failure. And so being able to create change, I think, definitely retools the fabric of our social layer in a way that Amelia was speaking to. And of course, we have the evidence of this. We've already been doing it within the context of Logo Circles. And so I'm just really excited to see how this continues to grow. Of course, our mindset, and this is something that Amelia can probably speak more to as well. The mindset has been, let's solve winnable issues that are more narrowly defined. Maybe they even seem small. Some people might even describe some of these issues as trivial, right? Like just speaking about bringing let's just talk about Zanzibar for a minute. So bringing the technology, the Raspberry Pis, to the children in that particular educational setting may seem simple, right? There's 10 of them. But the thing is that it's a start. We have to prove the case first and show that we can solve some problems on a lower scale. Of course, then this mission, this vision can also be scaled up over time. But I don't even think that we necessarily have to think like that, especially if we have more of a decentralized ethos and an ethos around localism, where the local communities actually determine what issues need to be solved. And then they could grow. It could be a larger issue. Like, for instance, Roxana probably can speak to what they're working on in London. That is what I would say is a more Herculean task, trying to solve for digital IDs. A real challenge there in that. But if you have the resources, the people, and the connections, and the community, and the local initiative, why not? Right? Go for it if you believe that you can have an impact. And I believe that they can have an impact. So it just really depends on the community. I think Amelia has spoken to this a number of times, and so has others at the organization. But the idea is to focus on an issue that we think we can have efficacy in resolving on some level. So this is the ultimate overarching goal of Circles, and at least in my view, as well. And you guys are open to add any kind of comment. And again, feel free to just have. We of course we always have these spaces as very conversational, so that we can kind of take it in a couple of different directions. Of course, with regard to the topic and to Logo Circles.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Winnable issues are the core of Circles. They're the core of kind of what we're trying to do as we build this movement around logos. Kind of how we describe them so new stewards can grasp it is, when you are trying to find a winnable issue for your circle to work on, it should be something that's small enough that you can achieve it as the group that you have, but it's big enough that it actually matters. It should be something that you can see a clear start and finish to that. So it's kind of clear when it's over, and you can celebrate that, and you've accomplished something, and you've really done something together, which I think is really important, as we are kind of bringing a lot of new people in who might not be activists. They might not be people who have ever volunteered on a
and Václav Havel. What happened is they kind of took over the old institutions in the government. I think Václav Havel actually became the president. They had a charter for this. It was called Charter 77. So what I think is that what we're doing in some way, we're very heavily inspired by that movement and the parallel communities that we're creating to resolve institutional failures are very much animated, right, and catalyzed by some of these earlier initiatives. It's not just the parallel polis movement, of course. It's also some of these activist initiatives and what referred to as counter propaganda activism that really animated the 70s and the 80s in the United States and around the world. And some of those activist ideas had been lost to the past. So I just wanted to share a little bit of history. I love that story and I love talking about it. So I want to give Roxana and Chair now a chance to add any kind of comments on their perspective as well.
Hello. It's been a very fun experience this past year, 6 months or so, or less even probably. Things have moved fast. One thing that sticks out in my experience, which I suspect everyone's experience is slightly different, is we are all unique snowflakes. But I don't like spinning wheels for the sake of spinning wheels, and so even from the beginning, my personal objective has been for output to come out of the Los Angeles Circle specifically, and thankfully we have a very dedicated group of people. I don't know how it compares exactly size-wise, but the recurring Circle attendees is a very strong core group from my perspective. And it's a majority, if not everyone, is quote unquote down for the cause. And the next thing I would like to see is meaningful code and proofs of concepts come out of the circle. I would really like to set that example, well, just for ourselves, in that if we can put something forward that will be useful for other circles and other people in general, I think that justifies the energy and effort expended up to this point. And it should serve, and it certainly will inspire me, because even up to this point and coordinating with everyone and putting these events on, it certainly has been very rewarding. But I see it's within our sights of sort of that next level of reward in having something out there, and we do now have very specifically a coordination app defined that we would like to work on. We've recently now defined what the project management flow could be for these initiatives, and so we are barreling forward to go from level 2 or stage 2 to stage 3, which would be in development. Stage 2 is gathering all of the requirements, technical specifications, and getting them documented, and then going forward and building. And that type of output, I hope, will inspire more technical contributions, and that's really like the identity of the Los Angeles Circle. That's what I would like it to be. What it will actually become is not completely up to me, but I do. I'm very encouraged and inspired. And I've learned a lot. It's one thing to coordinate from an isolated location. It's a very different one to coordinate week to week or month to month in physical spaces with people, and it's fun. I in any meetup, quote unquote, scenario, you have all sorts of motivations for people to be there. And sometimes, often even, they are not at all aligned with the stated objectives of the circle, but oftentimes people would like to be fed, if not siphon attendees from one meetup to another, maybe perhaps one that they control. And that's all fine and well and good. It takes all kinds, and we wish everyone the best. But one of the interesting parts of navigating the coordination, specifically in Los Angeles, which is a particularly vampiric and evil place, if you let it. That's sort of been a fun. I'm actually interested, maybe for a different space, to see some of the different angle shots that people have seen. Offers. I could tell you I have 3 or 4 different offers. Like, hey, let's combine our meetups. Like, hey, it's nice to meet you, but let's not. Anyway, I'm rambling now. I'll save the B word for later. But I'm excited. I feel like I've grown a lot in my own coordination abilities. And I look forward to leveling up again, and creating some output from the circle.
Yeah, Chair, I feel like you mentioned something important too, and this isn't, this isn't just you, but you highlighted the idea that there's probably a lot of people who haven't had the opportunity to flex their social organization muscle, right? That, a lot of us here, just probably even in this space, but just largely speaking, people on the internet who are chronically online, right? Like, I know I'm a victim of that situation. There's some people probably who don't even get to go out and travel to events and stuff like we do, right? And actually hang out with physical. Oh, you're a human being in the flesh. I haven't seen one of your kind in so long. It's great to be here. It's like a whole new kind of scenario that's unfolding where we actually have to go out there and meet people. I mean, this is also part of the consequences of what happens when the middleware of society becomes so eroded over time. It's almost like we lose touch with this idea of being able to connect with people. This is exactly what happened during COVID, right? Or whatever your views on COVID and the reality of what happened was, the one fact is true that we all were made to be very isolated in a lot of ways and lose our sense of connection with people, right? We're stuck in our houses or whatever for a set given period of time. And what that did was reinforce the idea that maybe we should be more isolated, right? One thing that any kind of system engineer, right, social system engineer, is not going to like is people having the agency to come together as a community to fight for what they believe is right, to push back against injustice, and to develop a civic society that actually has a good faith judgments in mind for creating transformation within the context of those societies. Because here's the thing, I think this is at the center, or one of the elephants in the room. There are people who don't want to see these changes that these local communities are going to initialize. And maybe that's happening already in some cases. So that does kind of paint a target on our back for trying to rekindle civil society in the ways that circles are trying to achieve. And I personally love that, right? But then again, I frolic with danger on a regular basis. It's just part of my nature, right? I would expect or anticipate that a lot of you here feel similar to that mindset, right? That's just that deep anarchist spirit that I have personally dwelling beneath the surface. You guys know how it goes. Okay. Any other commentary? I think Roxana's up here now, so if she has any thoughts too, this is a perfect opportunity.
If the Wi-Fi God works with me, I've been praying like no tomorrow, rediscovering religion in hotel Wi-Fi's. And there it goes again, connection lost. I will just try to keep it short. I'll just say, I think whenever you step out of your comfort zone, this stepping out of comfort zone means
Oh yeah, you're completely dead. Yeah, you are having internet problems for sure, because we lost you. Can anybody hear her?
No, I think we're
Mm.
rugged situation.
Yeah, no worries, Roxana. Go ahead, Chair. Say something.
I think there was a Dr. Strangelove-esque statement there. How I learned to stop worrying and love internet, Wi-Fi, rediscover. There's something there. There's something there. Shout out Stanley Kubrick. Vamping. A lot of new faces in the audience. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here on the 30th of December. Wait till you see what's going to happen in 26.
Yeah. Hey, so seriously, maybe Roxana will if her internet fixes, it's fine. But I also noticed that we have M on the stage. M it also runs a circle. So if you have any comments on your experiences, my friend, or how you're feeling about the current situation and the new year that's upcoming for circles, by all means, we're happy to hear your thoughts. Welcome to the stage.
Hey, thank you so much, Sterling. Hi, everyone. Well, I just came home like way after talking with Roxana. She she told me like, "Hey, wanna pull up? I'm here." And I was like, "All right." Um, we have a very long talk about like what could be the goals for 2026, and I would say that one of the main will be uh starting to actually building something. Um, I would say that 2025 was like a year of personal growth, I think. And the fun part of it is that it all started with a party. The party that I organized for Mexi is like what started everything for me at Barcelona, like every single Web3 group in Barcelona. And it ended up with logos, I think. So my talk with Roxana was like related to, well, yeah, a couple things that I should consider now that I'm part of Logos. Like, of course, it was the first time I ever organized an event for Logos, but so it doesn't happen again. Um, and well, some notes for this next year, some things that I can do with you guys, some others that are like more personal, and some others in terms of probably, yeah, this movement, this, I wouldn't say state, but mm, not even system, because we're not a state, we're not a system, we are, uh, how can we call it? Brotherhood, cult,
Or
family,
or network. That's a good
network.
term.
It is like all the valuable things that you guys are doing, and something that inspired me to come in and say thank you. And yeah, hope to hope to see you grow this year.
My Absolutely, Em. Thank you so much. Yeah, my personal inclination is that we don't have any choice but to grow and to mature as a community. And what I mean by that is it's really an inevitability, right? I think it's an inevitability because this is what people need. This is what communities need. This is what This is what they so desperately want. Even if they don't know that they need it, they know that they see that there are problems with the social fabric and with institutions. And Logos Circles is the remedy for that. It is the revivification of the social fabric on many different verticals, the people, the institutions, the structure, the technology, on and on ad infinitum, right? One of the things that I think about a lot, guys, and I probably shouldn't because it could also be detrimental to mental health, but this notion that think about I live in the US, right? And everybody is always at each other's throats politically, right? Arguing over the different political philosophies, which is very much a really terrible state of affairs because it polarizes people into different camps where they're constantly at each other's throats. And not only is a tremendous amount of glucose, right, human energy, brain power, being dedicated to that, but at the end of the day, there's also the possibility that violence could erupt and has erupted in various ways as a result of this kind of politicking. I feel like, and this is again my personal opinion, I feel like Logos, in the way that it's being developed as a community-based movement based on local needs, is diametrically opposed to these legacy ways of going about doing politics. I've said this in my written work in the past, my personal work, that we're trying to develop or create, or at least engender, a type of community that doesn't have to be at each other's throats anymore because we can simply exit and move into the communities of our choice. Logos Circles is definitely a massive appendage of that idea, right? Where you can move into the different kind of local communities that you want that have not only a physical context, right? Which is relevant, of course, potentially, but they also, of course, have a digital context that we can move in and out of more easily in our digital lives. And this is alternative governance already in the making. Of course, the technology that Logos is working on, the technology stack, is going to more firmly bootstrap these novel communities, right? Provide them with value flows and value structures, give them governance applications, and allow them a level of scalability and maturation that doesn't currently exist in the current political context. And of course, so many people are just wasting away trying to angle for their particular politico, right? Or their particular policy or rule or regulation. And it's just all so mentally numbing, right? So draining. And so it's almost, what's the word? Vampiric, right? Soul sucking stuff. And it just feels like a lot of people are looking for the exit mandate. They're looking for a path to succeed from that particular shit situation. And again, that's why I feel personally like my mental hygiene, right, is a lot better of a place than it has been in other years, especially when I was in a state of mind where I was almost black pilled in some domain, and I was just constantly just talking shit, quote unquote, about the system in the sense of like trying to get people to like shake people to wake up from it. But this is before I really started to process the idea of being able to exit and go into communities that we care about, learn to be more clear pilled, learn the idea that we can create actual change, and that's what we can focus on. So that's what Logos is really focused on. It's about creating positive impact, being clear pilled, not being so negative and so nihilistic, because that can actually harm you, right, in a lot of different ways, right? At least that's how I characterize it. Sorry, I had to do a little bit of a monologue. That just because the political situation is so stressful for a lot of people, and trying to provide optionality is so important. You don't feel like you have to be stuck in this vacuum of non-existence. Go ahead, Em.
Bro, I would say that if it wasn't because politics are like too fucked up at Venezuela, I would say that I will be the first with the initiative of saying like, hey, let's make a logo circle at Venezuela, because the level of control that we will be having since January, it will be insane. Like it, you know, um, back in the days, like in 2019, I remember that there was national police officers coming to my house, knocking the door and calling my dad, because he's always posting stuff on Facebook like, I don't know, fuck the government, or fuck someone who is like, from the Communist Party. And I mean, I still have fresh memories about it. So now it seems that beginning January 6th or January 5th, something like that, every single, um, how can I say it? Every single organism, whether it is economical or technological or financial, it will be completely related to each other. So whenever you say something related to something against their beliefs, you will be like, you know, directly affected in a bad manner. There will be a higher level of control, something that I would say logos could fix, could be a solution of, yeah, I would say communication in the main part. But also like it will be a purple place, or well, not purple, but you know exactly what I mean. Um, for people who are directly affected by this.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So, brother, one of the things, okay, and what I'm going to say here, I want to reiterate the fact that these are, we do the disclaimer at the beginning. These opinions are our own and not necessarily associated with logos. I'm going to say some crazy shit right now, okay? So bear with me. I think so. I came from the voluntarist school of thought. You guys know that. I was very much an anarchist. I spent a lot of time online. I seriously spent probably a good 7 years of my life arguing with people online. Not only arguing with people, but I got to the point where I was actually chastising people because of their decision to engage in politics. And I felt like I could argue a person into a corner, right? Like I could paint them into a corner with logical, rational argumentation, and that I could convince people one at a fucking time to embrace anarchism, right? So here's the thing. I think anarchists are directionally correct mostly, right? And we see this in governance failures worldwide, right? And their corporate cronies, etc. But here's the problem. You can't actually change people's minds by just yelling at them and chastising them. And you can't even use reason to convince that many people. In 7 years, I had like 3 people reach out to me and say, "Oh, your book, your ideas, they changed my mind." Okay, that's great. That's cool. So I changed 3 people and spent years writing a book and spent years arguing with people and debating people. And then when I came into this community, and this especially started to like grow in my mind after the invention of cryptocurrency, right? Satoshi, Bitcoin, the whole nine. This idea of exit started to blossom in my mind. This notion that we can leave these communities that don't share our values without having to convince people to accept our personal ideologies, right? We can now move into communities that accept our values, or at least generally speaking, relatively speaking, accept most of our values, right? We can't expect that we're all going to agree with each other on every single vertical or every single domain of thought. That's just not reality. This is also why more recently have embraced a philosophy called cosmopolitanism, which takes into account that we're all a social species, but we're all also individually unique and different. And so trying to develop or build a society and a community that embraces our cosmopolitan nature means having the ability to exit and move in and out of communities as we see fit and as they fit our values at that particular time. This, I think, is the recipe for building a society and a civilization and a world that is more healthy, that is more adaptable, that doesn't have as much innate violence, that doesn't have as much innate politicking. And I firmly believe that the Logos Circles initiative is built, or even if the Logos community doesn't necessarily use the language that I'm using here to describe it, this is how I personally envision it. These circles represent a new social order, a new way of understanding that we have our communities and we have the issues that we're focusing on, and that this is a representative of a new social fabric that is emerging planet-wide, right? That is emerging throughout the whole cultural context of our communities. So this is paradigmatic change that is occurring on a grand scale, and it's beautiful to see. And it means that we don't all have to be angry and nihilistic and lashing out against the system. You know how much energy that I have saved and glucose I've saved, not just arbitrarily debating with people online, right? In a way that's not going to create functional change, at least not in my own life and with my wife's, my family's life. That's just not how things work. So I just don't want to be miserable, and I didn't want to be miserable anymore. And this for me was a huge help. Right. Okay. I could go on. Roxana.
I think there's ways of control and obviously we're seeing that people that have not, nations that have not experienced extremism and communism and being in a totalitarian state are moving towards that. Previously, the previous generations had culture, had music, had religion, which was quite impossible to break. Um, Now they need something else to be able to align and express their values without becoming a target. So this is what a circle could become. It could become a way to express your values and align your values like a secret handshake without revealing yourself to the world, without revealing your personal beliefs and putting it on the table so that anyone can come in and attack you for them. And it's quite unique. And with the way the world is coming, purely digital, more surveillance, more tracking, which is a natural side to technology. Technology is neither good or bad, right? It's how we use it that defines it. I think with that in mind, having the privacy by default opportunities to just be yourself, be true to your beliefs, and naturally gravitate and find these opportunities where you can be yourself and you can align your individual values to a collective value. That's going to be very powerful, even in places like Venezuela, like Kazakhstan, which are becoming increasingly totalitarian and very control focused, for people to still express themselves and still say that in this whole mess, I am who I say I am, that without revealing myself to the world.
Yeah, Roxana, you nailed it. That, I guess that is another piece of this too, right? The surveillance regime continuing to exercise so much control over our, at least our internet culture for sure, but just society generally speaking, even the flesh and bone aspects of ourself, right? The real world aspects. This actually very much reminds me too of something that we have to continue to help at least inform people of, so they can exit, or they can exercise their right of exit and their ability to in various domains. It's what Orwell warned about, right? 1984, and he also wrote that book called Why I Write, and he makes the case that every time as totalitarianism in its various forms tends to rise in society, those regimes do whatever they can to minimize and to negate language, right? They actually destroy the fabric of language, so that it makes it very difficult for us to express ourselves in ways that are at very least orthogonal, right, to the ways that the regime expresses itself, and the way that it expects people to express themselves through various forms of propaganda, right? And this is a good analysis of the political context, right? The way that people argue and debate politics with each other with a very limited or narrow vision of ideas, right? Which is really a limiting or a limitation of language, right? If language is limited, what that means is a person's thought is by design limited. This is just a consequence of propaganda. So continuing to figure out how we can develop new metaphors, right? Always try to reach a new metaphor and new ways of understanding, and to expand new domains of language, which I think Logos does very nicely. Then we're expanding the turf for which freedom can grow, develop, and mature. At least the view of civic society as we understand it, right, within these different kind of communities, whatever their personal vision or whatever their unique vision of freedom or access or community is. And of course, they're all going to be, this is the thing, right? This is the thing I think is important to mention, right? It's not that government is evil, right? It's that people don't easily have the ability to exit, right? To exit these particular contexts, right? If a person wants to have more of a like bureaucratic kind of set, but there are some people who need to have their lives micromanaged in various ways. Maybe they want to have their lives micromanaged from cradle to grave. And if they want that, they should be able to have that. But there are, of course, and this is cosmopolitanism, right? Those of us who want to have a freer type of lifestyle, we want to have more agency, we want to have different kinds of relationships with our communities. And there's a whole spectrum of this is just personality. This is personality philosophy. These are personality differences between people. And to your point, Roxana, this is like one of the biggest problems with a surveillance regime and censorship. When you can censor people's movements and their ideas and technologies and currency transfers, you control the output, right? You control the creative output and the mental output of that particular society, and it limits the ability for people to exit in various ways. So education on this front is extremely important. And it's not just education like the anarchist lambasting of the people. Okay, maybe that's one domain at very top of funnel, but there's also education in the idea of exit, and the idea that there are all these alternative communities, and the idea that there are people out there who support you and your thinking, and there are different ways to regain agency, i.e. Logos circles, the regen community, and blockchain generally speaking is another one. So there's all this stuff that exists, but it's a matter of bringing it to awareness, bringing it to top of mind and attention. And I do think that's part of what we do at Logos. This is why we have all these partnerships. This is why we are really big on the idea of coalition building here, creating these different coalitions so that we can create this positive change. This is also why we're doing the Parallel Society event. We have all of these really sweet partners like Tor and SciDAO, right? We had the space recently. All of our friends came on and chatted with us. I recently spoke to our friend Aaron Day, who's been on the space a couple of times, just a great guy. He's going to come and hang out with us too at Parallel Society. Maybe he gives a talk. It's just creating this coalition of groups of people who may not even agree, again, on all domains, are going to continue to help have an impact toward creating the kind of future that we want to see. That's the Logos vision, at least that's my take on it, or the way that I see it. And I'm sorry, guys. I just ended up going on a bunch of different monologues today. I guess it was due time. I had all this pent up energy, right? That was it was brewing, man. I really love hosting these spaces with you guys and being involved in the Logos Circles movement. By the way, we are okay. So we have the time set for like an hour to an hour and 30. So what we can do now is kind of start winding it down, but I want to make sure that if anybody has anything to say, if Amelia, you have any final follow-up with regards to Logos Circles in the future, you guys come up and chat or just start speaking, because we can keep it going for up to another 30 minutes, depending on how much you guys want to engage. Because I'm not sure if anybody wants to hear me monologue for like another 30 minutes. I can.
We enjoy your monologues, Sterling.
Yeah, me as well. I think you got the blue ribbon this time, Sterling. I think you've got it out of my hands, really.
Hey,
I think it's a tight competition.
You guys aren't allowed to give out blue ribbons. That's my job. No, no, I appreciate it, Amelia. Maybe we share the blue ribbon this time. No, you can't really do that in Toastmasters. Man, they should. I've gotten so mad. Some people beat me before in Toastmasters. Like, how did they? Okay, I see why.
Okay, I suggest we fork the Toastmasters protocol, and that solves the problem.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were such a stickler for the rules, Sterling. I think we can make our own rules here. Two ribbons. I don't see an issue with that.
Okay, fair point. We're gonna have to change. It's no longer Toastmasters. We're gonna have to come up with our own name. Maybe they sue us.
Not if it's open source.
Take back Toastmasters.
Okay, there's one point that I was thinking of bringing up, which is language is a code. There's a very nice story about two brothers in Africa that developed their own code. It ended up being their own language. It's quite interesting if you guys want to look it up. I think it was some African country. It's quite unique. If I find it, I'll share it in Discord in the general chat. But the problem we have today is that language is very much subjective. So people interpret it the way they want, and it can be used against you, right? The things you do and say can be used against you. So we need to embed language with universal values that can be relayed to a group or to a body that specifically mean what they mean. Yeah, so they don't lose substance, they don't lose their meaning, and they can't be interpreted in a way that is being used against you or weaponized against you. And that's been on my mind for a very long time. And we've spoken about this with some of the people, some of the lawyers in the space, some of the people that are lobbying for decentralized technologies to not be perceived as the same as IP licensed technologies throughout the world. And we don't have yet a special formula that we can just apply. So I'm hoping in time with Logos, we can create the sort of universal values embedded in the language that we use so that no matter who adopts it, it can never be weaponized against them. So that would protect developers from building on top of privacy preserving technologies, that would protect activists, that would protect just advocates, refugees, just regular people like all of us in the spaces, really.
Yeah, right on. One of the things you reminded me of too, Roxana, is this idea of what we have a lot of really smart people working at Logos, right? Working with Logos, a lot of really talented technologists, just people doing crazy shit, like working on the mathematics behind zero knowledge cryptography. Insane stuff. And one of the things that terrifies me, and this has happened, and I've talked and I've spoken with some folks who are formerly working with Logos and who currently work at Logos. I'm not going to name any names, but I'm going to say that some people have told me directly that they're terrified of building what we're building because of the personal risk that it potentially entails. So there's a term for this. Edward Snowden uses this term in his book, Permanent Record. A lot of people have used it in various contexts with this idea of a chilling effect, right? So the chilling effect is this notion that if you're trying to develop technology, or if you're trying, even if you're not, so developing technology is just a form of communication, by the way, right? So if you're trying to communicate in any sort of way, you're creating technology, which is using a language, right? The language of code, whether it's Python, NIM, Rust, whatever it is, right? Or if you're just using the spoken word, and there is someone out there who says that you can't do that, that I'm going to hurt you for that in some way, or I'm going to imprison you or incarcerate you, and it causes you to be afraid, to fear being able to do the work that you're doing. That is called the chilling effect. And I think this is one of the most ubiquitous problems as it concerns our current status quo. Luckily, in some ways, that has started to not to loosen up a little, just a little bit. But to say that it's 100% gone would be a misnomer at very least, and a lie at worst. The current situation is we have to. This is why we have to keep advocating for our technologies, for our movement, for our people. I'm a huge fan of bringing to light people who have suffered injustices at the hands of the system. Right? Roger Ver was the most recent one, who I knew personally and know personally, and luckily he's out of his situation that he was in. But having lawfare enacted against you, right, potentially creates a chilling effect, right? And he, Roger was actually giving talks, and he had to be talks, quote unquote. Someone was talking for him, and he had a piece of tape over his mouth, right, that said censored. So this is an issue of the chilling effect. We have to do what we can to give people room to feel like they can do the work that they do. So, M, you have your hand up, my friend.
Bro, what you just said is something that brings me back to when I first heard about logos, and then when I got told like, "Hey, do you want to organize logo circles this time?" I was talking to a friend, not gonna say names. This guy has absolutely no filter and no Vaseline. He always says like the first thing that comes to his mind, just like me, something that I enjoy. Um, he said like, "Bro, for sure I will be down to create something for and with logo, but I can't handle the pressure of having any of those agencies with three-letter names, CIA, NSA, FBI, or whatever, because the pressure is too much." And it's true. I mean, it's like every single day that it passes, all of these agencies are like always having you on the scope. Some type of Charlie Kirk type of shit. Like if you pull up with something that actually works and protects people from surveillance, is like you're risking yourself too much. Me, for example, I have no fear because, well, it's not like if I was afraid to lose something, you know. But well, there's other people who have like their families, and they don't feel like they will risk too much just for, you know, spreading the word or building something.
Yeah, 100%. I do. You're right, Em. I want to be clear too, for the sake of this conversation and for the sake of Logos, that we're 100% not advocating to do anything illegal. What we're just saying is we're making the conversation and having a conversation around it. It should be well known and often articulated that we should have freedom of speech, right, in whatever domain that it is, and that we should protect each other and help protect each other and speak up as best we can when people feel afraid to just do their work, right, Amelia?
Yeah, I think this is a really important topic that's come up recently when speaking with some people interested in starting circles in some more difficult places politically, even just in terms of yeah, freedom of speech. So yeah, we have some local activists in Cairo who are interested in starting a circle in Dubai, and yeah, even our circle in Bangalore, right? Like, I think this is going to be something really important for us to figure out next year. Is, of course, we're not trying to do anything illegal, but like Em is saying, just inherently by trying to create a platform where people have freedom of speech, where people can't be censored, where you can have use a private technology that is protecting you, It's apolitical, but it's inherently political at the same time, right? So I think a really big piece for me early next year is making sure we can find out a good structure, a good way of communicating circles in these more difficult regions and difficult cities, just to make sure everyone's kind of as protected as they can be.
Yeah, great point, Amelia, and I totally agree with that. I mean, it is, and this goes back to the conversation from earlier too. 100% what we're doing, it has some inherent risk because of the nature of the technology that we're building and the nature of a movement that, I mean, I mean, it should be obvious. Activism isn't like a milk toast, crunchy granola endeavor. This is real shit. I mean, we're trying to create active change in communities, leveraging localism in ways that could disturb the current homeostatic balance in those communities, right? Through the institutions that exist. So what 100%. And I think that is also to say that some of these places that we're going and that these local initiatives are going to arise, some of these places you could even, and this is just generally speaking, but a lot of the organizations and institutions there, whether it's governments or corporate, they can do whatever the hell they want to do. So you can, no matter what you're doing, you could become a threat to that status quo. So 100%, this is going to be all about communication, positioning, and in some cases, even having a decision process on where to go and how to go. There's a lot of strategy that's involved in ironing out the details of moving into different places with circles. I think everyone here would 100% concur with that because, yeah, I think this conversation is really important because we don't downplay the intensity of what we're doing and the impact. Right now, things are relatively small, right? We really just kicked this off this year, and it's already growing so fast. You can imagine the political headache and heartache that could emerge as a result of these efforts. I personally think that it's beautiful, right? And the outcomes we're already seeing are efficacious. They have actually produced results, in other words. And this is going to be, problematic for probably some actors who want the status quo to stay the same. And so how do you deal with that? And it's a serious question that we have to ask.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and something that I've heard kind of various key legal thought leaders in this space saying is, as long as you don't have a token which is in, the top 30 on CoinMarketCap, the three-letter agencies probably aren't going to look at your organization, right? And you're probably going to fly under the radar, and it's probably going to be okay. As inspiring as it has been to see circles explode, I think now it's like, okay, damn, we're really onto something. If we do reach kind of 60 cities in the next year, and if we do achieve what our targets are of creating this global movement of empowering people with these technologies, like you were saying, Sterling, not everybody wants to see that. So it really does bring into question, what are the inherent risks of finding success for Logos and for circles that really, I think it's time to start thinking about too.
Yeah, this is even strange for me. So I've had a lot of haters. I don't know that I've had enemies. I really have to think about that, and I'm sure everyone is going to have to process that idea as well. What is the difference, and what does that actually look like? I'm just a dude who sits at a computer almost chronically online and reads books. Doesn't feel threatening, but then again, you wouldn't think that a computer engineer would be a threatening person. But man, the world that we live in is certainly an interesting place. You remember that Terence McKenna, right? I love this quote, by the way. I'm going to read you this quote. I just quoted it in a piece of writing that I have. So he said, it's just going to get weirder and weirder. And finally, it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. This is what it looks like when a species prepares to depart for the stars. You don't depart for the stars under calm and orderly conditions. It is a fire in a madhouse. And that's what we have, the fire in the madhouse at the end of time. I really like that quote, and I think we can all kind of concur that things are definitely starting to amp up in terms of the weirdness factor. I like this idea of just being a weirdness maximalist and just taking that to the extreme. Cool. So maybe it's go ahead.
Do you not think, Serlin, do you not think that because ideas cannot be killed, inherently having and supporting those ideas makes you an enemy of anyone that is against those ideas and anyone that is affected by those ideas becoming a reality?
Yeah, that's actually an it's kind of funny because I mentioned before that I'm personally a cosmopolitan, right? I don't really believe in the idea that you have to be like ideologically disaligned with people. Meaning that I think the world is big enough for everybody in their relative spheres and communities, and that's the message that I've always personally had is, if you don't really like my thoughts or my behaviors or my ideas or what I do, well, then maybe we're not fit for each other to live in relative proximity. Maybe it's better that if we go our separate paths and live in different areas surrounded by people who actually care about us, and that could be physically, right, geographically centered, or it could just be in cyberspace like we're all doing right now. All of us here who are in this room relatively agree on the same kind of general structure of reality, at least the reality that's in our heads. We mostly agree, I would say, on most topics, or we have an understanding that there are some things we do disagree on, but we're willing to let that go in the interest of community harmony. But that's not what politics engenders, right? So yeah, this is to your point, Roxanne. I think just me personally, I would just say to people who the disagree is like, why do we have to be enemies, at least on an ideological point? It would be different if I like hurt you personally somehow, or like I'm like trying to attack you. And of course we're just speaking about ideas right now. We haven't got, things do get a little bit different. We're talking about creating actual change in communities with stakeholders that could create like conflicts of interest and friction. But just on an ideological, or like an idea perspective, we can quote unquote agree to disagree through the process of exit, right? If you want, this is not me speaking, this is just an idea. But if you believe in government, or you want a government to control a particular area, sure, you should be able to have that. If I wanted to be a complete anarchist, yeah, sure, I should be able to have that. If you want some type of society that has a mixture of both, and whatever domain that looks like, even if that's possible, well, you should be able to have that. And anyway, I think this could eventually iron itself out if we really focused in on it in a real way in society, which would also minimize and mitigate a lot of the sort of the structural problems that we have, which all, of course, exist as a result of Molochian zero-sum game dynamics, I think.
I like to think back of when torrents were not illegal. Um, well, late 90s when they started emerging with internet networks and in small urban areas where people could connect to a network. And one of the things that were among the rules of being part of a system and being able to use and torrent, being able to access the torrents and the contents of the torrents was simply to um, provide the seed. What was it that you'd have to become a seed after downloading one file to retain your reputation score, right? So you had to ensure that your scoring wouldn't drop below a certain point, and you would give back by seeding the network after you downloaded a file. So you could get a book, um, and then you'd have to be online for 24 hours or try to stay online as much as possible, in equivalent, so that someone else could also access the benefits that you have access. And it's fascinating um, how that whole simple rule of joining a system and being part of a system of an online community completely got diminished by the fact that um, again, it was weaponized against people because it was said that, oh, only people use torrents so that they could access pirated content. But it completely disregarded the fact that people were giving bandwidth back to the network in order for them to reward the network for having access to the speed information. And it's a very strong dynamic where people can take something, but they can give back So access to knowledge, access to the network is done in a, there's a relationship that goes both ways. So I'm not just taking, I'm also giving back. And it's a strong dynamic that's kind of been forgotten, unfortunately. And it's kind of been taken for granted in the current systems that we have.
Yeah, well said, Roxana. That speaks very directly to like the game theoretic problems that we have. Like the it just speak plainly, it's just the incentives are broken mostly everywhere, right? People are incentivized to take, to your point, Roxana, and to not necessarily give back, especially if they can get away with it. If they get rewarded for bad behavior, which is just politics, right? In my opinion, you get rewarded for bad behavior. You work your way up. You're optimizing for your own personal benefit at the expense of the rest of humanity, right? At least at the expense of the rest of your community. And this is like, right? This is Moloch incarnated. And for any of you who don't know that terminology, let me just give just a brief breakdown. So Moloch is like the Canaanite deity of child sacrifice. Another way to conceptualize it is the deity of costly sacrifices. So in an ancient society, you would sacrifice your children at the altar in the hopes that you would have better outcomes in the upcoming war, that you would have a better agricultural return and surplus on your crops, and that your community would be healthier overall. But what happens is you're destroying your youth, literally, by sacrificing them. You destroy your culture in the long term, right? So you can see that this is why we call it a Molochian dynamic. And this is what I believe that not just at Logos, just in cryptocurrency and blockchain and any of the adjacent spaces, this is what we're trying to rectify, ultimately trying to create more fair incentive structures for engaging in finance, in society building, in community crafting, and trying to figure out how we can reward better behavior and either punish or not reward behavior that works to harm the actors and the other participants in that system. It's really simple. Cool. Okay. Let's see. I think a good time to do a final reset of the room here. We have about 7 minutes left remaining in this space. And so I do want to give everybody an opportunity to have any final comments that they have, especially regarding Logos Circles. I just personally believe that the future is really bright for what we're developing. I think that comes across quite strongly in these spaces, and that's why people are tending to gravitate toward these spaces. By the way, are definitely the numbers for these spaces and the people who are involved, they look really, really nice. I think it's just a testament to the hard work that all of us have put into maintaining this, which is not an easy thing by any stretch of the imagination. And it's been so much fun. At least that's my takeaway. So we have M first and then Chair with hands up, and we'll start wrapping it up.
Oh, Roxana by last, I think. Well, I know that expropriation is wrong. I lived it, but there's a phrase, statement, or saying that was used by some previous dictators of Venezuela, and it is, when tyranny is law, rebellion is a right. I would say that it is a pretty cute saying that we should be taking just to, make people aware of what we're actually doing, not only by the spaces, but also by Logo Circles. I think, yeah, that's my last word.
I just want to add a little caveat, very small one, to what you said, Em. I largely agree. Of course, when he says rebellion, I would say peaceful rebellion, right? Or like a rebellion that is in the exercise of exit, right? So that's just a clarification, but I do like the phrasing of the terminology. Cool. So I know Roxana's hands up. That might have been a glitch. I think Chair was next then in this case.
Hello. There are a few things I'd like our regulars and newer joiners, if you could do now and in the near future. You can see the Logos Tech account here in this space, the black background with the Cream logo. Please follow that account as well. That is where more of the technically and programmatic and building type content will come out of, though. We will also be supporting other community initiatives on that account as well. Also, the Logos YouTube account, please find it and subscribe to it, as there is an abundance of new programs that will be coming your way very soon. Also, bookmark logos.co. Visit it every day, as there are new things coming to that site every day. Explore it. There's a lot of new stuff, especially if you haven't been there over the past month or so. I would encourage you also to join the forum, or at least read, but go ahead and sign up, because if you are inclined to reply or participate in a thread, it's still going to make you sign up and then go through the, not a bot confirmation. So the website, logos.co, the forum.logos.co. Follow the Logos Tech account, find the Logos YouTube account, and follow all of those. Logos.co, always the source of truth. Rely on the domains that we have control over. And everyone have a wonderful and happy new year. And I'm very excited to exclaim forth into 26 with you all.
Thank you for that, my friend Chair. And I'll add to what Chair said. Also, don't forget when you navigate over to logos.co to pick up Jared and Peter's book, Farewell to Westphalia, because a lot of the ideas, especially around governance failures and decline in institutional trust, a lot of those ideas are covered extensively by Peter and Jared in the book. And then, of course, the solutions that we were discussing here, especially on the tech side with retooling civic society and deploying new novel governance applications, are, of course, also covered extensively in the book. So that's highly recommended, especially if you're new to the space and you want to understand what is actually happening, and maybe all you've heard about is Balaji and the network state. This is the other vision, right? The other vision that is, I don't want to use the term antagonistic, but it's in a different vein, we're more focused on grassroots localism, trying to figure out how we can solve these local community issues and deploy technology that is 100% cypherpunk coded, whereas Balaji's is more of a top-down type of setup. So if you're interested in learning about the other aspect of this particular movement within the context of parallel societies, pick up Farewell to Westphalia. You won't regret it. Cool. All right. I think, this is it. This is a perfect time to close up. I want to thank everybody, and we at Logos want to thank everybody who showed up to the space. I do recognize that there are OGs who showed up and who spent the majority of their time here, and also other circles leads. So I want to thank all of you guys, Girl and M here, circles leads. Also, again, OGs and people involved directly in the Logos network, RGM, Uzair, Fabiana. Also, of course, Girl is here, who's a circles lead as well. Did I mention that already? Maybe I did. My mind is fried at this point. We have Dave here, Tiger, also Lalo, OPDE, and we have some new faces in here. I think Justice down there in the audience, and then Mars. So again, want to thank all you guys for coming. We're here to transform civic society, to retool our institutions, to create and generate network and grassroots-based movement and activism. And we're extremely proud of all the work that has currently been done, and so happy that you guys are here. We're going to keep pushing this movement forward. We're creating a paradigm shift, and we're developing and deploying a technology stack that empowers these communities to stay safe, to stay private, to stay sane, and to keep this